Today we will look at passage 2 from ACT 74F, which is a practice assessment that you can find online. So passage 2 begins with question number 16. So to begin with here, let's have a conversation about parenthetical expressions. So the sentence under consideration here is, at the age of 34, Pollock sailed his dream down the Douro River in Portugal. It all began, as Pollock is likely to point out, with a single cork. Now you notice as I was reading that, I read that as an aside, as if it were enclosed in parentheses. That's why we call it a parenthetical expression. So rules about punctuating a parenthetical expression involve, if you begin it with a comma, you end it with a comma. You begin it with a dash, you end it with a dash. And so in this sentence, you see that it all began. Right there's where the parenthetical expression begins, and there's not a punctuation mark, and there should be a punctuation mark where it ends, and that is where it ends. And so if you look at the choices, G is the correct choice because it puts the comma after began and after out. Now, it just so happens that number 17 is also a parenthetical expression question with an additional punctuation question to it. To amass the staggering number of corks needed to construct the boat, 165,231 in all. Notice there's the parenthetical expression, and it is enclosed with a comma at the beginning and a comma at the end. Pollock convinced the staff of several restaurants. So the question becomes, do we need this comma? And the answer is no. There's not a pause there. There's not a need for a comma there. So when you come over here and look at your choices, you've got to find where the parenthetical is marked off correctly and doesn't have this unnecessary comma after staff. C is the one that does that. The parenthetical here, the author chooses to use a dash to mark it off, but it's marked off on both sides with the same type of punctuation, and there is no punctuation after staff. Now, someone might ask, how do I determine when to punctuate a parenthetical expression with dashes versus with commas? That's really an author's choice, and you will never on the ACT have to make a distinction between commas or dashes. Dashes are a little more emphatic than a comma, so that's just an option that you have as a writer. Number 18 is also a punctuation question. Pollock eventually received cork donations from a cork importing company based in Portugal. There's really no pause. There's no sentence division within that, and so there's no need for commas, and that would make F, no change, the correct answer. We're going to use no change 3 times in passage 2. Number 19 is a transition question. So you've got finally, next, first, and also. So constructing the boat introduced a challenge of another variety. Pollock blank tried gluing the corks together. This is the first example that we've been given. So it's not finally, but instead it's C, first. So chronologically, this is the first thing that he tried. Number 20, he calculated that it would have taken him and one other person more than a year's worth of 8-hour days. Now, the question here looks like it's actually twofold. You've got the question of singular possessive, and here it's singular possessive. S apostrophe is plural possessive, so we're just talking about more than a. A indicates that it's singular, so it's not going to be plural possessive, and this is just plural without the possessive. We have the word worth, the noun after it, so we need the singular possessive. Now, the question is also more than. Then indicates time order. Than indicates a comparison. So you're talking more than, that's a comparison. So the correct answer is G, more than, with an A year's singular possessive worth. 21, which choice most effectively introduces the paragraph? You have to understand that this paragraph was about his first attempts and then several other attempts to make a cork boat. And then this paragraph, he used a foam template to assemble a group of corks. He then fastened each close to a cork. So this is a final or additional attempt that he is using. The best answer here is D. After a series of trials, Pollock devised a workable strategy. When you have a question like this, you've got to understand the paragraph before and the paragraph that the sentence is introducing. So you've got to read 2 paragraphs there to make a good decision. 22 says, which choice provides the most specific description of the assembled groups of corks? You remember yesterday I told you about diction questions. This is a word choice, a diction question. And so the word I would underline would be specific. What's more specific? To say pretty interesting, hexagonal, certain, or just say shape? Well, G, hexagonal. It helps you visualize the number of sides in this shape. Number 23, here it says, to bind clusters together and shaping them into flexible columns proved to be both efficient and architecturally sound. So this is a question about parallel structure. If we say to bind, then we need to say to shape. Or we could say binding and shaping. So in geometry, parallel lines are lines that never intersect. In grammar, parallel structures are grammatical structures that are repeated in the same way. So when we're talking about verbs, if they end in ing, these verbs happen to be functioning as a different part of speech, but they need to be in the same format. So shaping, binding, to bind, to shape. When you come to your answer choices, you find that C is the correct answer, binding clusters together and shaping them into flexible columns. So it's a parallel structure question. Number 24, which choice best indicates that constructing the cork boat was challenging? This is a diction question, a word choice question. I would underline the word challenging. And so would you use the word proper, authentic, rigorous, or grim? The best choice is rigorous. Rigorous indicates something is difficult, which is challenging. 25 is a verb tense question. In his childhood imagination, he had saw himself floating the boat in his neighbor's swimming pool. Well, saw is the past tense of see. When you add have, has, or had in front of it, you need the past participle. That changes saw to seen. He had seen himself. And so the correct answer there is B. He had seen himself. Number 26, but at a length of 22 feet, Pollock's masterpiece was. This is a question about punctuation. That punctuation mark there, that comma is needed. It would not work to put a semicolon there because you can only put a semicolon between two independent clauses. This is not an independent clause. So the best answer here is that third, no change. So no change to number 26. Number 27, Pollock's masterpiece was best suited with a grand voyage. This is called an idiomatic preposition usage question. In other words, is this the correct preposition, or is there a better word to be used with that idiom or with that expression? And here the best choice is C, better suited for. And it just makes sense. If something is well suited, it is suited for something else, not suited with something else. Number 28. Actually, this is the third, no change, number 28. In 2002, the company that had donated thousands of corks to Pollock's project sponsored the vessel's launch. It will be no change. When we're talking about a company, we're not going to use who or whom because it's a thing. And that, with no punctuation mark, works. If you use which, it always has a comma in front of it and would have to have a comma at the end of that phrase, and this sentence does not have that. Number 29. There, during the boat's successful journey on the Douro River in the country of Portugal, Pollock's dream was realized. If you'll notice here, Portugal has already been mentioned. And so that should be a key to you that this is a question about wordiness. And if you recall from passage 1, what did I tell you about? If you know it's a question about wordiness, the shortest answer is probably going to be the right answer. That holds true in this question. D is the correct answer. When you insert it, it doesn't create a fragment or a run-on or any sort of other sentence error. So that is the correct answer. Number 29. And that's all we have on that passage. My packet skips a page. So 29 is the end of that passage. Hope that you find these videos useful and that walking through answers gives you more confidence as you take the English portion of the ACT.